iPad is also falling asleep already. So welcome everybody. My name is Tobias Blanke. I am one of the investigators of the RPA on Humane AI here at the University of Amsterdam. And I'm very pleased to see, in quotation marks, you all again for Humane AI Conversations. The idea behind them was very much that homeworking and also Zoomification of our work make it really very difficult to do these kind of chance encounters and kind of new shared research experiences with colleagues. And so we introduced these Humane AI conversations to somehow at least simulate that. So we want to create some opportunities for you to meet and engage with researchers who have, as you, a kind of passion of Humane AI or human-centered AI, and we also try to keep it as informal as possible. So this is organized as a little chat with a short introduction, because we feel this works best in these kind of Zoom settings to experience kind of the new Humane AI ideas. So the last conversation was in February with Professors Senay Gebriab and Hinda Hanet on understanding bias in AI systems. And the next one will be with Dr. Marieke van Erp, interviewed by Dr. Giovanni Colaviza on the new Cultural AI Lab. All the details of these events are, of course, on our website. And then I should also say that this event will be recorded and placed on our website. But of course, you as an audience cannot really be visible, so it mainly affects all our speakers here. But they agreed to that already, so they can't run away now. So finally coming to today's main event, and of course one of the big themes of AI and big data is kind of the transformation that happens in the social domains to our institutions and our practices in this world. So we are particularly delighted to have today with us Sigrid van Hoek, Barteld Braaksma from CBS, Statistiek Netherlands, and our very own Charles Jeurgens, Professor of Archival Sciences. I suggest that they introduce themselves best when they start speaking in a minute. But let me finally express my excitement. In a way, this is also a very unique event because for the first time, we will see a real-life solution done in a major institution in the Netherlands to address algorithmic accountability. So let's start with a brief introduction to the work. And I think from my knowledge, I think Barteld, you will start. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. I will start and give a very broad overview. Then Sigrid will continue explaining our AI Starters kit, which she has been very instrumental in developing. And next, Charles will tell something from his perspective. So it's first of all, thank you very much for inviting us to this session. Personally, I think it's very important to look at AI in this way, especially in Europe. The European Commission has also stated that we want to promote human-centric AI in Europe. And of course, in Netherlands, being part of Europe, we support that. And basically, in our office, this is also something that we really stand for as an office. So I will very briefly try to give an overview of what you're for, supported by a few slides, only very few. As you mentioned, so we represent CBS, the Dutch National Statistical Office. Our job is to produce statistics, which basically means, if my slides will advance, so that our job is to turn all kinds of data sources into information. We already do that for more than 100 years, but what you see now is that the amount of data that we can access is growing at a very quick pace. In the past, we had surveys, censuses. We had to send people door to door to collect information. Now more and more information is stored electronically in government registers, population register, tax registration, and so on. Increasingly also companies, big data, and so provide us with information. So our job is to to bring data sources from the raw data to useful statistical information, which we serve all kinds of users in society. Ministry use it for policy making, university researchers as a base for scientific research, the journalists write about it and whatever. And all of this is very strongly supported by professional standards that we have. They're also written down in Europe in the European Statistics Code of Practice, which says that we should be impartial, independent, based on sound methodology. And that's also where the connection with AI comes in, because AI is also in our world one of the new methods for data processing. We already use quite sophisticated statistical methods, but it's now augmented by AI. And what we want to achieve is first and foremost that the data that we use are fair, unbiased, don't discriminate against any groups, and also that the methods we use don't introduce any kind of bias. So that's it's very much in line with the humane approach, I think. And in that sense, a question that we got a couple of years ago is, well, is it possible at all to create a fair algorithm? What does it mean? Our work in this area of fair algorithms started 2 years ago, when this student, Rick Helwegen, who was a student of artificial intelligence of the University of Amsterdam, came to us. He said, well, I want to work with you and the city of Amsterdam to study the possibility of creating fair algorithms, for example, for fraud detection. Mind you, fraud detection is not an area of work for CBS, but what we can do is study the theoretical way if it's possible to create a fair algorithm based on the information that we have in-house. So that's what the students worked on. So we published a paper, an article on our website, and then it was taken up in all kinds of areas, including a page, the big interview in a Dutch newspaper, Trouw. On the opposite page, there was an article about Trump and Macron, so it was very good company. And then that was really taken up, so there was really a need in Dutch society to work on this. So people came to us and we launched a project, and Sigrid will tell more about this, to help municipalities in the Netherlands, starting with Amsterdam, but including other municipalities, Union of Municipalities, Ministry of Internal Affairs, and so on. They all worked with us on trying to find out what it takes to create a fair algorithm. And then we also created a connection with Charles. It's a student of his, Tobias van der Knaap, came to us studying archival and studies and history. And he said, well, could you find me a position for an internship at CBS? Then we said, well, so we think that also documenting our algorithms is an area that's very relevant. So he also started to work in this project of fair algorithms in the area of documentation. Charles will tell more about it. So that's where I want to start. I'd like to say, this is one of the areas that we think is very important, and we want to contribute it from our perspective. And Sigrid will now continue to show how we did it with the starter kit that has been developed in our projects.
Yes, so I'll continue. So my name is Sigrid van Hoek. I started working 2 years ago at CBS after my Master of Industrial and Applied Mathematics in Eindhoven. And I work as a data scientist, so I do several projects, for example, one on sensor data, but also this project with fair algorithms. And this was a project that we did in 2019 until summer of last year. But it's not only work from me, it's also from Anna Metschreven and Matthijs Eggers who contributed. And as Barteld already mentioned, there were other partners involved, like Minister of Internal Affairs and the local government of Amsterdam. So the project in general was called Impact with AI with Impact. And then one of the outputs of this project was a starter kit, which kind of helps local municipalities with very practical information, how they can work with the, machine learning algorithms and with AI, but it's in a very broad sense, and also meaning classical machine learning. So how they can, what they can do in order to create trustworthy AI and good projects. So I'll quickly show the starter kit, but I have to mention it's in Dutch. Yes, so we developed this during 4 days of work together with some municipalities who were involved in this project. And together we came up with this structure of having a technical part and a more policy-related part. And the technical part is not only for the data scientists who create the machine learning or the AI part, but also for project leaders, managers, and the goal of this overall process is to ask the right questions at the right time. So at the start of a project, beginning, this toolkit contains questions about, for example, the context of a project, about the law, and about what kind of data are you going to use. So GDPR is involved in some of these questions, and the idea of this starter kit is that people can fill in all those questions, and it's kind of interactive. And at the end, you will get the Downloads tab a report with suggestions. You should maybe look at this. Have you considered or argumented this this decision? Maybe you should think about it. So this exploration phase is what we identified as the first phase of a data project. And then there's the development, which is basically the development of a proof of concept of your machine learning. So it's still in progress. You're trying to find out the right parameters, hyperparameters of your model. And when you're finally finished with tuning the model, then you get to the implementation phase. And in the case of a local government, this also involves policy and people who are not common to use with models, but they have to use the models or use the outcome of the models in order to communicate it to the people that we're working with. So a lot of this implementation phase also concerns the right communication. And then the last phase of a project is called usage, which means also regular checkup for the algorithm. So the data might have evolved over time. For example, a shift in some kind of parameter, which may result in a lack of accuracy of the model. So you have to regularly check if the model still fits the goal. And also, for example, if there's some kind of a feedback loop, meaning that the output of the model has input is the input of the model at a later time, then you might want to make sure that you maybe use another source of data, that at least the input data is representative for what you want to calculate. So all those questions in this toolbox, we created them together with the municipalities. And then this toolbox is not finished yet. So we so this Utrecht Data School is part of Utrecht University. They're gonna get this toolkit, and that will be on their website hopefully soon. And they'll also develop the policy tab. The communication is still going on, so we also wanted to include some information like what can you use if you have a data project. Maybe you're a very small local government who doesn't have expertise of data scientists, or who want to hire external companies to do a data project, then what information can you use? Yeah, an important part of the starter kit was that you are able to download the report with the results and suggestions, and also that you can leave feedback, because it's not a dashboard which is quite finished. It will actually be never finished over time. It's machine learning techniques, and also the policy and the definition of what is exactly fair will keep changing over time.
That's what you wanted to say, Sigrid?
Yeah.
Shall I take over? Okay. Well, my name is Jeurgens, and I'm a professor of archival studies at University of Amsterdam. So I will reflect a little bit more about on the relevance of archiving records management in this context. Well, the use of algorithms by government agencies has a lot to do with transforming data in meaningful information, or to use a metaphor, processing ingredients for making a dish. And government agencies are, as we know, large producers and consumers of data and information. And governments govern primarily by continuously collecting and processing data and information. It also means that information is, in the end, an asset to be used for accountability and transparency. Being able to deliver information, for instance, in parliamentary inquiries or freedom of information requests, depends on, for a large part, on the quality of the management and archiving of data and information. And that's also the reason that many countries, which is also the case in the Netherlands, have regulated management of government records by law. And not in the first place to build archival sources for future historians or researchers, but in the first place for being able to be transparent and accountable on the short term. For instance, for members of parliament, for municipal councils, but also for citizens who want to know on what basis decisions were made to which they have been subject to. Now, in the Netherlands, appraisal and selection of data and information which is collected, processed, received, produced, and communicated by government agencies is anchored in archival legislation. So every government agency should have a legally established retention schedule in which is determined for every government process that is performed by an agency for how long records that are created or received need to be kept. And it means that these schedules are detailed schemes which list all the processes that are performed by an agency and define which when the records, which is data and information, of each process needs to be destroyed. That can be after fixed period of time, which can be, for instance, after 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years after creation or processing and so on. But also the records that must be kept forever and in the end transferred to archival repositories, which is approximately 5% of all data and information that is created and collected by agencies. Well, interestingly, the retention schedule for municipalities, which is designed by the Association of Dutch Municipalities, was updated last year. And one of the major changes was the introduction of a new category of records and processes. It's not even very clear what word to use here, algorithms. And in the updated retention schedule, it is stated, and I quote, algorithms with far-reaching societal effects and/or complex structures should be preserved. In order to properly justify fully or partially automated decision-making processes of a municipality, it is therefore necessary to keep the designs of the underlying algorithms, including explanatory notes and accompanying documentation. This usually concerns simple decision tree algorithms, which are pre-programmed formulas with which predictable process steps can be automated. The retention period of this must be at least as long as the decisions which are the result of the application of the relevant algorithms are valid. And that's the end of quote. It's also stated that in that retention list, in that updated retention list, that municipalities should distinguish between the use of algorithms that have a potential major impact on the rights of data subjects, the citizens, and algorithms for which this does not apply. And further research will have to show in which cases permanent storage of advanced algorithms including design documentation and possibly also source and output data, is required, and in which cases these are eligible for destruction after some time. And I think it's indeed very important that these questions are addressed. And my research interest is very much on the question of what needs to be documented and archived to be able to create evidence and evidential value, to be able to explain what assumptions have been made in design processes, what needs to be known from the data that are used in the design and in the use of algorithms. And the attention for algorithms given in the retention schedule of the municipalities is, I think, a valuable first step, but of course not enough. The contribution of records management and archiving in the Netherlands to accountability and transparency is still very much based on the paradigm of managing information which has been produced and has been ingested in what we call formal document management systems. And recently this became painfully clear in, for instance, the parliamentary inquiry into the child care allowances and the taxation bureau, when Prime Minister Rutte, for instance, stated that the Ministry of Algemene Zaken, General Affairs, had turned all systems upside down in the search for information, and the committee got everything that was found, but the fact that it was much less than the committee had hoped for and expected was just because, in the words of Rutte, the Algemene Zaken is a small ministry and the manpower is simply lacking to record everything. According to the Prime Minister, most of the cases his ministry is responsible for are handled verbally. And the consequence is that the archives of the ministry are, in the words of the Prime Minister, maagdelijk beperkt. Difficult to translate, but it means that at least hardly anything is in these archives. And this is, of course, from an accountability and transparency perspective, a dangerous reasoning. And that can, I think, also easily be translated to the use of algorithms in government processes, decision-making processes, and so on. Because it's not only the outcome, the decision that counts, but especially the processes, how the decisions were made. And if that is not documented, yeah, then it's very difficult and actually impossible to be accountable. The paradigm, and that's my concluding part, the paradigm of archiving based on what is gradually changing into a new approach that has been developed especially by Monash University and has come to be known as record-keeping informatics, which takes much more the perspective of what should be documented and what should be recorded to be able to reconstruct the whole process, to be able to give insight in the steps that were taken, the assumptions that were made, under which circumstances algorithms were developed and used. And record keeping, or still to use the more familiar word archiving, in that perspective becomes much more part of design of systems. And I think the toolkit that was just briefly explained by Sigrid also fits quite well in that approach. And it's, I think, an interesting and relevant step in that direction to become more fair, transparent, and being able to be accountable. So that's my part. I give the word back to Tobias.
Thank you very much. It's fascinating how this all, our research now tries to translate into public institutions. And now I'm going to ask a few questions from the team, but in the meantime, I invite the audience to use the Q&A box, which you should have at the bottom of your screen, to post questions so that I can read that out later. And I see that the always inventive Dimitris have already found this box, so we already got one question. But let me ask first a few questions that the team has put together for you. The first one is very much to say why an organizations such as yours actually should be interested in honest algorithm and what you expect there to be in the future to happen.
Yeah, maybe I can answer this this question. I realized that maybe I forgot to mention my role at CBS. I'm the innovation manager for CBS, which means that I deal with everything which is different, so to speak. Basically, we are statistics factory, production organization. Our product is statistics, but that world of data and data processing is ever evolving. And that's where this question comes into play, because this is a new development. It's happening. And we have to find out what it means for our own statistics. Once we use algorithms and AI, we have to make sure that we do that in a fair, impartial, transparent, and independent way. So that's one reason. Second reason is that we also have by law. So CBS has its own law, which says what we are for. The law also says that we should help other government bodies with their statistical information production. And that's clearly what Sigrid has shown. There's a clear demand from other government bodies to also understand what algorithms do. And of course, an algorithm can only be as good as the data that you put into it, and that happens to be our core business. Mm-hmm. So data processing via algorithms are our core business. For others, is part of their work, not central to the work, although it's becoming more and more central for many people. So we have a head start here, and we have an obligation to help society and especially government with a better understanding what it all means. So that would be my answer to your question.
Thank you. And do you know of any other statistical agencies in Europe which are doing similar work? Is there some kind of coordination around this? Or?
Not really so far. I'm also responsible for innovation in the United Nations statistical community. Okay. One day a week, so there's, and also in Europe I have quite a lot of activities. So I basically know more or less what's happening. AI, machine learning, and so on is taking on. So people are starting to get interested in it, but it's only just begun. The only institute from which I know that they also work on transparent algorithms, but I don't have the details, is Statistics New Zealand. This is completely on the other side of the world, but also is because they have a very active, well-organized society, very modern. So they're able and to address these questions, and also society ask them, hey, can you help us here? So I'm now trying to get in touch with them to find out what's their approach.
Interesting. So then maybe it's interesting for me also from Sigrid, because it would be curious to know how is it to be a data scientist in a statistical agency, also with your own background. Is it a very quick, immediate step, or did you find it different thinking, or when you first joined the statistical agency?
The models that you make need to be very accurate, so of high quality. So that's one thing that struck me when I started working at CBS. And my team works with a lot of innovative data sources. So I also like that you're kind of in the very first phase of exploring a new data source, seeing like, is it representative, for example, for the Netherlands? And this is also a very new topic, so I really like to be involved in this. And I think it's also a topic, Barteld already mentioned that there were a couple of students from the UvA and from other universities who also worked on this topic. So I like the cooperation with universities as well. Yeah.
Great. So then I have a question for Charles. You already made a whole new kind of can of worms, as they say in English, so to say, which is of course the archiving of algorithms, which is directly linked to the kind of accountability that we all require from governments. What do you see is the actual contribution of archival science, archives, to this question of fairness in algorithms?
Well, I think a very relevant part in being able to be accountable for what you have been doing is that you understand very well what is behind the data. So from archival science, we do not start with the data and the information, but we start with the processes that are behind. So the whole context in which data are created and used, produced, collected, and especially the purposes of the reasons for processing, for creating, and that connection, we have quite outdated terms which were already invented in the 19th century, respect for and original order, which is of course not very modern anymore, but the word provenance is, I think, a very important word, because that immediately makes a connection to the processes behind the data. And I think that will be that's, I think, an important should be an important contribution from our field to this, trying to make algorithms, but also the use of algorithms and the data that are used in these algorithms to make it more transparent, clear, and understandable.
And is there also an understanding from, let's say, government or whoever funds these things, that this is an important part of it all? Or do you get money basically for this?
Yeah, that's, well, interestingly, because of the big issue of the kindertoeslagaffaire, of course, this has had a major impact on let's say, the information management of the government, and a lot of money is now reserved and really available for improving the information management and information production and everything that has to do with the information part of government, to improve it. And so also for archiving, but also for let's say the inspection of because it was a very small inspection, was very small, only I think 7 people working on the information of government, of the central government. Well, they get a lot of new money and are really able to I think to improve the quality of it.
Great. So Barteld, maybe then we come to my final question. That's very good, which is about this Belastingdienst. So children's, what is the translation? Children's, whatever. The kind of recent affair around Belastingdienst. Is this now, do you see a major impact on institutions in the Netherlands? And is the Netherlands now infamous in the rest of the world because it has to do all this work around this? Or?
I hope it will have a major impact. So we still have to see what happens. Because if you followed the discussions, it took a long time for politicians to acknowledge that they were part of the whole thing. What has also become clear in the investigations that the Parliament has carried out so far is that it's a very complicated affair. Many different players in many different roles have contributed to what has happened, which is horrible from the perspective of the individuals that were affected, but also horrible from a perspective of society. So this is not the society that at least I, as a citizen, want to live in. And that has to do partly with the things that Charles mentioned, that it has become clear that what has happened was very difficult to reconstruct. So I hope that it also raises awareness of the importance of documenting and being transparent and accountable on what you do. And that's exactly where also another problem that Charles mentioned kicks in. Some people, apparently they claim they don't have the time to become accountable, say, well, we're too small as a ministry and so on. Well, in my mind, but I don't say that as an employee of CBS, but as a citizen, my feeling is that it means that they don't think it's important enough to devote time to these things. So the first thing is that people have to understand it's important to be accountable as society, and also that people work for government see that as part of their ethical values to do that. But as I said, I can only hope that this improves the situation. There's a whole culture behind this, and quite a lot of different actors that have to move.
Great, this was a perfect ending. In a way, I take this now that as a kind of call that every organization should do a little bit more humane AI, which I think we can only very much welcome. Now I go over to the questions. I was about to hand over to the audience. I'm still me. So the first question and answer question comes from Dimitris, and is a question for Sigrid. How does the toolkit assess the potential harms of an unfair algorithm? And the follow-on question is, and how does it inform the civil servants of these harms?
Yeah, so you have this step of the technique, and then in the first phase of the project, you need to identify which data are you going to use. So if you're going to use, for example, ethnicity or gender, that are often very sensitive attributes, sensitive features. So you have to be very careful in that case. But it also depends on the application of the algorithm. Does it affect citizens? Does it affect just maybe trash, locating trash outside? That's a very different application, and the notion of fair in that sense is not is less relevant. But if it's fairness is relevant and there is some kind of a definition, what is fair in this context, then you should be very aware of it and also test your model. So there are several metrics already being developed of how you can test if the model you created is fair with respect to a sensitive attribute. So I think that should be, yeah, if fairness is an issue, then that should be part of the modeling processes. And as to the second question, how to inform civil citizens about these harms, yeah, I think it's very important that people understand that models are just they are a summary of the reality, so they're never always right. There are also always some cases in which case the model predicts, for example, yes, and the reality is no. So you should always treat it with a little caution. And for local governments, that's often comes down to also having a human in the loop, someone who checks the results, who validates it. So that's very important.
So we need more people like yourself.
Not only like myself. I think the data scientists, they can play a very large role, but also raising awareness in people who are not developing the models, but who are using the models or using the results.
Great, thank you very much. Then we have a question in the chat from Alex. Is this toolkit already used in applied to real cases?
So yeah, we would like to apply it, but at this moment it's being transferred to Utrecht Data School, and they're gonna improve the toolkit, and I think also make it public or make a workshop from the toolkit. So another thing that they have is the ethical data assistance. So they created a workshop around it and already applied that to local municipalities and other governmental institutes. So they want to do the same for the starters kit. But at this moment, it's not publicly available.
Okay, and then the final question, if anybody has any other questions, please do post them now. Otherwise, I will just use the chair's privilege and ask all my questions. So this is from Ose van der Linde. To reflect on the process, assumptions, and decisions made in this project itself, can you tell us a bit more about how the specific steps and questions of the starter kit was developed and evaluated? So what do you think is basically the kind of best practices in terms of developing these things and also deploying?
Maybe I can start answering that, and Sigrid can add. Because broadly speaking, this project was designed in a collaboration between different partners. So we focused on the municipality level, because in practice, a lot of algorithms are being applied by municipalities, or they are not really yet applying a lot of algorithms, but considering them right now, but they are the first contact with citizens. So we started working with Amsterdam, University of Amsterdam, and also Code for NL, which is a group of IT professionals who want to do something good for society. Mm-hmm. So which means that we really took a multidisciplinary approach when defining the project. So that's very important. Sigrid already mentioned that. It's not only people like Sigrid who understand data and are data scientists, but also policymakers, civil servants who deal with citizens, the citizens themselves. So they all have to be involved here. They all have opinions about what is fair and what not. And fairness is not a stable concept. It can differ from region to region. It can differ from time to time. So it's very important that you share your ideas about what is fair, and also contribute from your own perspective. Because an IT professional wants to design a system which works well. A policymaker maybe is more focused on implementing policies in the right way, but they are from different areas. So what we need to enforce is that they work together, and that there's really a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach, which also relates to what Charles just said. Also in this world of archiving and so on, so people need to understand from different perspectives what it all takes, and that's a difference in the new world. All these things that are really interconnected, and you have to take all these people on board. So, and after we had first results, and Sigrid can comment on that, we also showed them to other people and asked them, hey, what do you think of this? And this really caught on. So the word spread, and more and more people became interested. So also answering, coming back to this question about has it been applied? Not applied in algorithms in real cases, but it has played a role in raising awareness and creating greater involvement of people. So maybe Sigrid, you can add. Or?
Well, that's already a great answer. I think, yeah, the discussion is very important. I should add that it's a very iterative process. So we started off with a general discussion, and there were also some people from a legal background who contributed to the starter kits. That's also one very important topic, and during this iterative process we keep adding questions and reviewing whether the questions were relevant. For example, we saw the difference between larger municipalities who hire data scientists by themselves and the smaller municipalities who had external partners doing the data science for them. So maybe there could be a distinction within the type of technique between the larger and the smaller municipalities.
Great. So I was about to ask my own question, but I see that I have now another question by Emma. This is to Chao. What kind of new methods would we need to invent for archiving data-driven systems, and which existing methods and principles are directly applicable?
Yeah, that's a big question.
That's why you are a professor.
Answer
those big questions.
I'll do my best. Well, I think important is to mention that there's a kind of move to what we call archiving by design, which means that you need to understand that, let's say, how the purpose for what data are processed. So why they are collected in the first place, how they are collected, but especially for what they are collected and processed. And if you want to be accountable with having data and information available, then in the systems that are designed, it should also be designed what needs to be recorded and not afterwards, because the current standard is still that archiving takes place after data are used, produced, processed, and so on. And they are, if you are lucky, they are still in the applications and in the work systems, but they are definitely most of the time not in the so-called record management systems, because that are specific systems, and it's very problematic to use them also by civil servants, because you have to bring, for instance, think of a very simple email application. You have to bring your email to that system, and it's very manual work, and people don't like to do that, so people don't do it if they are not, yeah, it's almost impossible to make people do that. So you need to develop much more and to invest in systems in which is archiving immediately part of the work processes, and that archiving is in itself sustainable within a sustainable system. And sustainable is a difficult word, because sustainable is not only the sustainability of the technique and the technology, or the sustainability of the data, but it has also to do with the sustainability of, let's say, the infrastructure that you develop. And that is a much broader way of looking. And we have to get rid, in my opinion, from the even within an organization, the silo way of organizing, that you have the legal specialists, you have the data scientists, you have the records managers, you have the security officers. They are all organized more or less separately, and instead of that, they are connected to each other and connected to the business. They are so. No government agency is created for creating and making records. They do different things. So you have to think from a different perspective, that you make archiving and record keeping connected to these primary processes. So that's my thought on this difficult and big question.
Great. So I'm going to use then the privilege of also being a professor and ask one big question at the end, which is mainly about the transdisciplinary collaboration that I think all of you now spoke about at the end. So I basically have two quick questions at the end. The first one is, what are also the difficulties of this? I mean, we all like to talk about this. And also, of course, when it comes to fairness and these kind of questions, we do need to have different perspectives, yes, without doubt. But what were your experiences with difficulties of actually doing this? And then finally, because this is, of course, a transdisciplinary network, and I know that the wonderful Utrecht Data School is already involved, but how can we all help actually make this a success and develop this in the future? What would help you? And maybe Barteld, you could start, and then we go Sigrid and then Ciao. Yes, because that was the order of last week.
Yeah, this is also a big question. Starting with what could help. Yeah, the first thing that could help, and where everybody could contribute, is by doing things like this. Talk about it, discuss with each other. What do you think we should do? What do you think is the right approach? What is fair, and so on. So this is basically something which is a moving target. The society is evolving. The way that my father looks upon privacy is different than the way that my daughter considers it, for example. So we should find a society way to deal with it in the right way. So that's one thing. So another thing what it takes is that you also should include becoming aware at a very early stage. So there's a professor at Amsterdam University, Maarten de Rijke, who says data science should already be a subject at primary school, because data is now everywhere. People have to know what it takes. So some of you may, if you have a Dutch background, may watch Dutch television. Arjen Lubach recently talked about the digibetocratie, which means that many people in the Netherlands, also politicians, they don't know enough about what the digital age takes. So that's one thing. It should be in the already at an early stage, and especially at university. And then also the university classes and the whole curricula should be to also become aware of this. Of course, not many people are able to oversee the whole field. So that means that you have to organize that people work in teams. One of my colleagues calls them Da Vinci teams, because nobody in itself is as good as Leonardo da Vinci usually. But if you put a team together, then you can have all the disciplines that, for example, Charles enumerated. So that would be my my reply for now.
Great. Sigrid?
Yeah, I think one of the difficulties is already being mentioned, that often the large organizations have a team of data scientists, a team of policymakers. Also happens for municipalities, and they should work together more often. So having a network or a group in which you can talk, a platform such as this webinar, I think that's very important. That's key to evolve, to also raise awareness about fairness of algorithms, trustworthy use of algorithms. And one other thing which I think how we all can help, and especially those at the university, is by designing algorithms that are fair by design. So that's one of the research topics that was that happens in this project, was to create an algorithm that doesn't just neglect the variables that are sensitive, but actually use them in order to create a fair algorithm. So I think there is still some ongoing work.
Thank you. Charles?
Yeah, so yeah, what I want to add to that is, I think what is very important that we always ask ourselves, what can we learn from things that are really going very wrong in society? For instance, that scandal that it becomes a political scandal, but what can we also learn from it, from the mechanisms that are behind? Another thing is, yeah, what I notice, especially in cooperation with different disciplines, is especially the language issue. And so maybe we use the same terms, but the meaning of these terms are very often different. And we need to invest a lot of time to understand what is the reason that maybe the same word is used. For instance, data and information and records and processing and collecting, that are all terms that are used in many different disciplines, but how they are framed is very often very different. And the expectations of that, because of that, if you do not discuss this profoundly, yeah, then the result will be can be very problematic, because you deliver something which was not expected by the others.
Thank you. That's excellent. What a wonderful finish to our talk today. All that's left for me to say is to thank our speakers again, and clap for everyone else who's out there and is now enthusiastically clapping. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was really exciting, because we really, for the first time in a way, saw a real humane AI project in this round, and also the difficulties that are involved with this, and also actually the direct political implications. So I hope this all develops very well, and I look forward to seeing more of this project. Then that's all that's left for me, is to thank the audience and point you all to our humaneai.nl website, where you can find the future events. And I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.